Welcome, dear students. This session focuses on the origin of a language. I hope and expect by the end of this session you would be able to understand where, when, and how human language originated and what are different theories about it. Well, my dear students, there is no general consensus about how human language originated. If we look at the sounds that are produced, a hum versus a grunt, it appears to be an ancient part of the brain that we share with all the vertebrates like fish or frog. And we suspect that somehow it developed somewhere between 100,000 to 50,000 years ago as a spoken form, well before the written form that was later on developed some 5,000 years ago. Well, there are different stories and there are different theories and there are different approaches towards how the origin of a language is seen. I would here talk about a few important theories that would give you an idea of how language is seen or perceived. The first theory that I would like to talk about is the divine source theory. Well, in the biblical tradition, God created Adam, and whatsoever Adam called every living creature, that was the name thereof. So, according to this divine source, different religions would have a belief in the divine origin of language, where God taught language to the human beings, though the stories vary from one religion to another. Alternatively, if you look at the Hindu tradition, language came from Saraswati, wife of Brahma, who is considered to be the creator of the universe in the Hindu religion. If we look at the Islamic version of the story, Quran also gives us some information about, the use of language. And in fact, in Surah Baqarah, we are told, فَتَلَقَّى آدَمَ رَبُّهُ كَلِمَاتٍ. God taught Adam certain words. So, this origin quite matches the origin that we find, the kind of version of the story in Christianity. In most religions, it is, I would say, believed that human language has a divine source. Some experiments were made to confirm this, and these experiments had different results. In fact, human beings have always been intrigued by this question. So at different time points in history, different people made certain experiments. The basic hypothesis is that if human infants are isolated and they are kept separated and alone from other human beings, are they capable of using a language? And if so, which language would they speak? So, the Greek writer Herodotus reports the story of an Egyptian pharaoh who, kept two newborn babies somewhere 2,500 years ago, in isolation for a while and tried to have some experiment with them. So they were just kept with goats and with mute shepherds. And later on, when it was seen what they would speak, it is reported that the words that it spoke were identified as the Pharisaian word bekos, meaning bread. From that, the pharaoh calculated that the Pharisaian language that was spoken in the area where, Turkey, we find this area called as Turkey today, this was the original language. However, this seems to be a very unlikely story, because if we dissect the word bekos, apart from the ending kos, which was added in the Greek version, the first part of it, be, if you notice the sound that goats produce is more like b sound. So it is very difficult to say how far the experiment contributed or not. Another experiment was made by King James IV of Scotland somewhere around 1500 years ago. Again, children were kept in isolation, and it is reported that they started speaking Hebrew language, confirming the king's belief that Hebrew was the language of the Garden of Eden. However, all these experiments, despite their conflicting results regarding different languages, share one thing, that the source of human language is, not as such, the divine source. Another theory about the origin of language is the natural sound source. This is quite a different view on language. Primitive words could have been imitations of natural sounds, the natural sounds that people would hear around them. The animals and the birds, the kind of sounds they would produce, as human beings would hear them, as they would fall on their ear, for example, caw, caw, or coo, coo sounds. So this was the origin of the language, or the beginning of language, according to this theory. There are certain words in English language, for example, splash, bang, boom, rattle, buzz, hiss, screech, etc., that, according to this theory, then would go into, those, inspirations that come from the surroundings. This theory is also called bow wow theory of the birth of language or origin of language as well. It has also been suggested that the original sounds of language may have come from natural cries of emotions, for example, pain, anger, or joy. So all those sounds, ooh, oh, ooch, aha kind of sounds, they were the beginning of human language according to this theory. Yet another theory is of the social interaction source. And according to this theory, that is sometimes called Yo-Yo theory as well, the sounds of persons who were involved in, certain kind of physical activities. They would produce certain hums or grunts or groans, and those sounds were the beginning of human language. The important feature of this theory is that for the first time, human interaction, the social context, of the creation of language was brought and was considered, that it was used for interactive purposes. However, apes and other primitives also lived in these social groups and used certain kinds of grunts, etc., which is a criticism on this theory. The next theory that I would quickly like to talk about is the physical adaptation theory, which says that instead of looking at types of sounds, we can look at the types of physical features humans possess, especially those that are distinct to human beings. So at some early stage, an upright posture, looking at the historical development of human, body. An upright posture, bipedal, that locomotion that is, moving on 2, feet instead of 4, like other animals, etc. So, distinguishing and distincting it from a gorilla, and the development of human skull that is different through, those times of 60,000 years, how there has been a kind of a gradual development and evolution. Another theory is of the tool-making source, and it is believed that for the purposes of, survival, human beings, made certain tools. And, their preference of using their hands, the right-handedness, and their ability to create those tools was a significant feature in the development of human species itself. It was followed by certain, developments in human brain, which led towards, then the creation of language. Yet another theory is of the genetic source, that at birth, human baby's brain has a certain ability, to create language. And the human baby's brain, that is just a quarter of its eventual weight, it develops through the times. There are changes in human larynx as well, the position changes, etc. The almost automatic set of developments, something more powerful than small physical adaptations of the species over the times, according to this theory, are considered to be a source of the origin of language. And the question that I would like to end this session up on is language capacity genetically hardwired in newborn human beings or not? Because according to this theory, The answer is that genetically human beings have this capacity, irrespective of they are kept in a particular social environment or not. So, I hope you have an idea of certain theories about the origin of human language.